Well,
That,
we'll kick it off. We might get a couple more people, but yeah, let me talk about the Agora Foundation for a second before I turn it over to Lance. What we do at Agora is a few things, but we encourage great book seminars. So we study literature, philosophy, theology in sessions just like this, 2-hour sessions, and normally they would be on site, but since this all started, we've been online, and we've had this really fortuitous circumstance, which is people all over the country and even the world have been coming to our seminars now, which is fantastic. And with this, basically what we say is that the teacher in the room is the author of the work that we're trying to study. And so if it's, you know, like or whoever it is, we're just trying to understand what is this person saying before we decide if we agree or not. And then the music festival came up a couple of years ago because of course it's such a wonderful part of Ojai, but what's interesting is trying to approach contemporary classical music can be so challenging in a way, right? There might be so much dissonance and things like that. And so what we thought is let's have a seminar once a year to at least introduce people to how you might listen to this music. And a few years ago, Tim Mangan, who kicked off our first event, he said something like this. He said, if you listen to a Bach piece, it's like a cat that just crawls right up in your lap and it presents itself to you so clearly in a way. But then you listen to another piece and it's asking you to meet it somewhere. And so you could decide not to like it, and that's totally fine, but it's a kind of a challenge in the good sense of the word. And so that's what we really like that. And it's such a fun opportunity. And then Lance came to our attention, and it's, you know, this is the second year now in a row that he'll be doing this for us, but I would love to do it every year, is listen to these pieces and approach listening in a kind of a more thoughtful way, I guess.
Andy, I have a
Yeah,
suggestion for you. Is that
uh-huh.
there is so many festivals in Ojai that maybe you can introduce that some way, like for example, for the wine festival, to have somebody that teaches how to taste wine or appreciate wine or whatever.
You bet. Actually, we with my friend Roxana, we've been toying with this idea of having a year-long class on something like Greece, where you say, okay, we're going to read all this Greek work and then eat Greek food, have the Greek wine, go to Greece. Yeah. So anyway, there's the sky's the limit. There's lots that we could do. But yeah.
I can help for France, Morocco.
Okay, great. Well, Lance, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you. Maybe Pierre, that's an idea. We could combine the music festival with wine as well, not just a wine festival. Well, thank you. I always like to begin, when I begin classes, I've started to do it this way. You won't see this, but you will hear it. There's a Pavlovian effect that comes to this. When I have a class now and I ring the bell, everyone comes to attention. They come to silence together, and it's really quite wonderful and stark. But I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to Andy for hosting these seminars and for inviting me last year and again this year, and particularly for Laura Walter, who was my dear student many years ago in Kentucky, and we've stayed in touch throughout the years. And I think it was your idea to connect me to the Ojai Festival, since she's the director of education for the Ojai Festival and has some wonderful videos for children and music education that you should check out on the ojaifestival.org website. And of course, Gina Gutierrez and Jamie Bennett, the president of the festival. So I'm very grateful to be here. This is a really privilege for me. And I think gratitude is always a good place to start, whatever we're doing. It's so easy to focus on, particularly with the avalanche of news about the pandemic, about the racial riots and violence and so forth, the uncertainty of everything. It's easy to be knocked off basis. But the fact that we can be here together to enjoy and explore music is really something to be grateful for. I'd like to, some of you I know from last year or from many years ago, but I'd like just to have you introduce yourself by saying your name and where you are in the world now. And let's say just the most 3 words of what drew you to the festival or to this event here, this Zoom seminar, which could be, I don't know, that's 3 words, or I could start off, and since I think everybody's streams are different, maybe I can just call the names on the list.
Yeah.
And when your name is called, you identify yourself, where you are, and then 3 things that draw you to new music or why you're here. And since I'm the one who dealt this, I should use my 3 words. Learning, community, music. Andy.
Oh, yeah. Andy Gilman in Ojai. And I grew up here, and the music festival is just this ubiquitous thing that just is part of what it means to live in Ojai. And I would say 3 words. The most godlike of the arts.
Wow.
Okay, that's parenthetical. Cheryl? Cheryl, we can't see you. Can you hear us?
I'm trying to unmute. I just unmuted myself.
Yeah.
I live in the Los Angeles area, actually Topanga Canyon, and I've been attending the Ojai Festival for quite a lot of years. And I obviously have been Zooming with some of my friends from the Ojai Festival, including Gina and Anna and a few other people. And my view about the Ojai Festival is avant-garde, new and unusual music. So that's more than 3 words.
Well, you can hyphenate them. Thank you. Bridget? Is Bridget here?
I don't think so.
Okay. Laura?
Yes, so I live in Ventura. I know Lance from my 3 words are listening for reals.
Great. Catherine Krause?
I live in Ojai, and I'm involved in Agora and the music festival. And I'm just trying to figure out, I know there's a there in new music. I haven't figured it out yet.
Good. Tom? Oh, yeah. Tom Krause?
Yep. So, hi, I'm Tom Krause. I'm married to Catherine. I also live in Ojai. We're in the same house. I'm in one room and she's in another. My 3 words would be desire to learn.
Great. Thank you. Pierre?
My name is Pierre Schubert, and I was in science and technology all my life. So now I use the Agora Foundation to expand my mind, and that's what I do with Lance, expanding my feelings.
Great, thank you. Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy Sandstrom. I live in Ojai. I love the Ojai Music Festival. It's always very challenging for me. And my 3 words, I don't know, but I'm in awe of it all. I'm in awe.
Thank you. And then Arthur.
Arthur Marquis. I live in Long Beach, California. And basically, curiosity, what's deep listening? I have no idea.
Good. Kate?
Kate Barnhart. I live in Ojai. I love to learn. I love new music now. And Ojai, the festival is a joyous community event.
Great, joyous community event. Excellent, thank you. Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Wagner. I also work at the Ojai Music Festival, and thank you so much for hosting these. I attended yours last year and had a better way to talk to people about where someone might find discomfort and why that might come about, and taking a deep breath. So I guess my 3 words would be relevance, curiosity, and intimacy.
Great, thank you. Barry?
I'm going to go back to what you said. I'm going to say learning music and Pierre, because Pierre gave me a call and said, you really can't afford to miss this.
Great, thank you, Pierre. And thank you, Barry. Diane?
Thank
you. Yes, I'm Diane. I live in Ojai, and I have to say the music festival was one of the things that brought us from LA to Ojai. My husband and I have attended regularly since about 90 or 91. And I just want to add, he passed away last year, but the last concert he saw was the last one we're doing, the 4th one on our selection. So that really, is significant to me. And my 3 words are open my ears.
Great, thank you. Isabel? I don't see, is Isabella on?
I don't think so.
Okay, great, that's the only. Joanna?
Hi, I'm Joanna Binford. I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky. I now live in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I am excited to be here. I spent many of my college years working with Lance, exploring new music, and Laura and I spent a lot of time in our college years staying sober and listening to great music. This festival is new to me. I was really grateful for the links that were sent because I got to spend the last 24 hours listening to the music and reading the notes. And I guess the 3 words for me being here are Lance and Laura.
Joanna's a violist. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Gina.
Hi, I'm coming to you from St. Augustine, Florida, thanks to Lance. And my 3 words are Lance, calligraphy, and music.
Thank you, Gina. Gina is a master calligrapher. She has a wonderful book on calligraphy. I should point that out to you. It's really wonderful. Calligraphy as a path, as a spiritual path. It's really wonderful. I met her in Seattle, actually. And did we do that workshop with Stuart Dempster?
Chris Roberts.
With Chris, okay.
Kabbalah.
Yeah, great. And Candy.
Hi, I'm in Los Angeles, longtime friend of Lance. Appreciate so much just his way of being in the world. I couldn't not take advantage of this. My 3 words are beauty, intensity, and reflection.
Thank you, Candy. Thank you for being here. Larry?
Let me say, I think, Joanna, there's a lot of sound coming through on, I might mute you just for a second and see.
Sorry, sure.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Larry's up.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I missed the first part. I was late getting here. I was playing some church services today. They're starting to open up. I'm in Illinois, but I'm here because of Lance and Laura.
Cool.
Great, thank you. Tara?
She's not on.
Okay.
Find out, but she's not here. Yeah.
Okay, Maureen?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Maureen Kelly. I'm coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. I'm a cellist, and I did a master's at University of Kentucky with Lance there as one of my faculty members, which I will forever be so grateful for. I know of the Ojai Festival because I know of people who have played there, but I'm here today just because of Lance. So I will say that my 3 words are friendship, admiration, and opportunity.
Thank you, dear. And Licity.
Hi. So, sorry, I look like I'm in the glow of this red glow, but so my name's Licity, and I'm in Ojai, and one of the reasons I moved to Ojai was because of the festival. I actually came to visit, saw the festival, moved right in. So, and I always joke that the Ojai Music Festival like raises the IQ of Ojai for like a whole week, and it makes me so excited. That sounds really snobby, but I think I can say that in its company. So, and I just, I'm so grateful. I fell in love with Lance there last year, and I'm continually falling in love with Laura. So I'm grateful for their inviting me to this space. And my 3 words are nourish my soul.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We missed in Joanna's window. There's Dave, who's sitting next to her. If you want to ask him. Hi, Dave.
I don't see.
It's Joanne. It's the guy who's sitting next to Joanne, where there's 2 people in the one window.
It's Brandy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Joanne.
Yep.
It's next to Licity on mine.
Oh yeah.
I'm Granny Joannie, and I'm here in Oakview, which is a suburb of Ojai, if there is such a thing. And my 3 words are education through music, because that's where I met Laura over 20 years ago, and it was life-changing, and it has led to my participation with Bravo and with Andy and Agora, and life is good.
Wonderful.
My name is Dave. I guess I live in Ojai now, and I moved here for a variety of reasons. One might be present. So my 3 words would be community, love, music.
Great. Thank you. So we have a strong Ojai contingent, and then people from all over the East Coast and down south. And I'm in Mexico City with my wife, and I have been. I came here for spring break on March 16th, and I haven't left for obvious reasons. But through the miracle of technology, I can do my job as director of the graduate program in music at the University of Kentucky, and do it as well from here as I can anywhere in the world. It's amazing. So another reason for gratitude that we can stay in touch in this way and can listen to music. I wanted to start just by playing a piece. I don't know if I even need to share the screen for this, but just to play it. So I'd like for you to, just listen. And when I say just listen, it's a sense of just listening, so that when your mind wanders, sound outside or something distracts you, your task is simply to come back and connect with the sound, right? So that's just listening. Interruption, distraction, not a problem, as long as we have some place to come back to. So I'd like to ask you if, after opening and listening to that piece, if you're in the same space as you were before it started, and whether the act of listening to something so spacious in a way had an effect on your state of mind. This could be a rhetorical question, you know, that it's interesting to explore the ways that listening can open space. But I wanted to give a little, just a little background. Last year, Andy said, you know, the topic could be listening to new music, because the Ojai Festival, although not exclusively contemporary classical music, it's predominantly and known for its newer music and challenging variety of styles of new music. And I thought I didn't want to tell people how to listen to new music or what is important in that, but I use the term adventurous listening. And I'd hope to prove that by the end of that seminar, that adventurous listening is redundant. That is to say that listening itself, pure listening, or deep listening, which we'll talk about in a minute, itself is an adventure. Mm-hmm. Whether one is listening to any kind of music or just listening. And this is, I think, if there's any takeaway from this seminar or a through line, it's the quality of attention we can bring to our capacity to listen, right? And I think we'll see that the festival, some of you say, I'm challenged by or puzzled by or disturbed by even some of the new music that you hear, you know, and you want to try to understand it and want to like it because you're thinking maybe you should, but it's actually what you're bringing to it that is the most important thing, I think. And that listening can become a path. I'll talk a little bit more about that, a practice and a path. And so this particular seminar, I actually, I have Laura to blame or to credit with the name of this. The spaces where you go to listen is on the a piece by and an installation by John Luther Adams, one of the composers that you've listened to or was on the list, that there's a myth in Alaska, on the northern coast of Alaska, the Inuit people, that you would go to this place and it was so special that the flowers, the birds and the trees spoke and created a song. And so I'm interested in metaphors, actually, of listening and that are useful. And so that one metaphor is space and maybe deep listening, which of course is a spatial metaphor. So that's my goal actually is to challenge you and to think what adventurous listening might be, which is adventure means to take a risk, excitement, a gamble, because you're not sure what the outcome will be, but it's exciting, right? And listening can be that, if we can practice opening to things not only that we like or that are familiar, that make us feel good, but that may be challenging or puzzling, right? And I'll argue continually that this capacity to listen can be of use outside the realm of a concert hall or a Zoom call or listening to your own music, in that perhaps it could help us listen to people with other points of view, right? And at a time like this of polarization in our society, in our country, it could have important implications. So one of my dear mentors and friends who passed away, it will be 4 years, I guess, in November, is Pauline Oliveros. Pauline was born in 1932 as an experimental composer, like maybe in the school of John Cage, in which she considers everyone musical and everyone a musician in a way, and that music can be in the ears, could say, of the beholder. And she's the one who actually coined and maybe copyrighted the term deep listening. This is, many people use that term now, deep listening, deep psychology, deep ecology, deep this and that, indicating something more profound or more complex maybe than the run-of-the-mill things. But so I wanted to show you a couple of brief excerpts from, well, let me pull her up here. If I can commandeer the screen. And so are you able to see that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
This was, Pauline was my guest for a lecture series at a concert in Lexington in 2006. So this is her in all her glory at a store called Third Street Stuff and cafe. And anyway, there she is. I brought her into my medieval and Renaissance music history class, not because she had anything to do with it, but because she was such a powerful person. I just wanted my students there, my sophomore students, to have a chance to meet someone so remarkable as her. She has a video. I was going to ask Andy to play it, but I think it comes through better here if I can do it. A year before she died, in 2015, she gave a talk in Indianapolis at a TEDx foundation, and which she's a little bit of the background, that she and her friend Stuart Dempster, another composer and trombonist at the University of Washington, discovered in Port Townsend, Washington, a cistern that held water. It was an underground cistern that held up to 2 million gallons of water because there was fire damage around a fort that was there, Fort Worden. And when the fort was abandoned, they drained the cistern, and they discovered this underground enormous cistern that, called the Dan Carpole cistern, that had a 47-second reverb. So that's to say, if you clapped your hands for 45 seconds, you would hear the reverberation. And in fact, the piece that I played, called Conch Calling, was recorded there underground. And in fact, the term deep listening actually came from a pun that the cistern was 14 feet underground, and they noticed that when they were playing, the cistern was playing back at them. In other words, the reverb. And let's see if, yeah, I want you to hear this. And she's discussing the difference between hearing and listening. So here's Pauline.
Down. The practice of deep listening, as it has developed, explores the difference between hearing and listening. The ear hears, the brain listens, the body senses vibrations. Listening is a lifetime practice that depends on accumulated experiences with sound. Listening can be focused to detail or open to the entire field of sound. Listening is a mysterious process that is not the same for everyone. Humans have developed consensual agreements on the interpretation of sound waves delivered to the brain by the ears. Languages are such agreements. To hear and to listen have a symbiotic relationship with a questionable common usage. We know more about hearing than listening. Scientists can measure what happens in the ear. Measuring listening is another matter, as it involves subjectivity. We confuse hearing with listening. For example, music schools program ear training classes, but the ear can't be trained. What really happens is a cultivation of musical mind. I differentiate to hear and to listen. To hear is the physical means that enables perception. To listen is to give attention to what is perceived, both acoustically and psychologically.
See if I stop sharing. I want to show another clip from that, but and this is a talk. It's a brief talk of only 12 minutes, I think, and I can give you the link so you can listen to the whole talk again. A little bit later, she says, "So what did we learn from the cistern? Learning to listen to the cistern space led us to listening more closely to all performance spaces and beyond. Performance space is as important as voices and instruments." So I want to play just another little clip from that. Where did it go? Here she is. And at 462, yeah.
Deep, coupled with listening, or deep listening for me, is learning to expand perception of sounds to include the whole space-time continuum of sound, encountering the vastness and complexities as much as possible. Simultaneously, one ought to be able to target a sound or sequence of sounds, perceiving the beginning, middle, and end of them as a focus. Such focus and expansion means that one is connected to the whole of the environment and beyond. My practice is to listen to everything all the time and remind myself when I am not listening.
Good, okay. Let's see, am I back?
Mm-hmm.
I can't.
Yes, you're back.
Yeah, you're back, yeah.
I just have the screen up there. Okay, yeah, I wanted you to hear Pauline's words and maybe see her a little bit. That was, as I say, near the end of her life. But her practice was a lifelong practice of listening 24/7, which actually she dedicated, made that decision when she was 21 years old. And I'd like to suggest that listening is a practice, that we can practice listening volitionally, because it's not just about hearing, but involves the psychological, intellectual, function of memory, to connect with sound. And it may be obvious, but maybe not, it's worth repeating, that if you're listening, you're not thinking about something else. If you're thinking about something else, you're not fully listening. So this may be one of the ways of understanding and practicing deep listening, is as a contemplative practice, as a meditation practice. Often, I'm also a meditation teacher, and we often, in sitting meditation, we often work with the breath or some maybe visualization, so that when the mind wanders, you can come back to that, to the breath or to that activity. But one could just as well use sound or any of the other sense perceptions. So that listening can be a practice and a path, right? And the difference is that a path has direction, right? So if you're practicing with a sense of the path, then that gives purpose, right, to that practice. And I like to argue that something as special, as many of you know, as the Ojai Festival can be a really wonderful example of how we can expand our listening, right? Grow our ears. And whether we find it pleasant or whether we like it or not, it expands our capacity to be receptive and to be present, right? So I think this is a really powerful practice. And at the Shambhala Center, the meditation center that I'm associated with in Lexington, I have a series. Actually, I think it would blow your mind. We have a YouTube channel. I sponsor concerts there, usually for students, but sometimes for faculty or traveling musicians. There's no piano, so it's not, there are no piano recitals or song leader, but guitar and strings, and sometimes world music. And musicians love to play there because it's a meditation center, so people come in order to listen, right? In order to connect with the sound without judgment. And so there's this really symbiotic relationship of support from listening and the generosity and the relaxedness of musicians playing. It's really quite wonderful. And what it does is create a quality in the space, because the space was meant to listen, like the bowl, right, in Ojai, right? When you enter that space, it's like a ritual. So I wanted to turn to that music can be, or that sound and listening can be a practice, whatever the sound source. Sometimes if I wake up in the middle of the night, can't go back to sleep, I listen, I breathe and listen. So much more effective than getting up and reading until I fall back into bed or something, or struggling to go back to sleep. Maybe let's open up the space a little bit, because I love the section on Lonely Child, particularly the introduction I wanted to play part of, Aphrodite's introduction about music and ritual. Are there any comments or observations?
I love the way that she used her mouth, the undulating sounds, the kinds of trills and bird-like sounds that came out. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Marjorie, whose nickname is Candy, is the linguistic anthropologist at UCLA. And her and her husband Chuck are two of the leading linguistic anthropologists in the world, actually, on this specialty. Chuck passed away 2 years ago, but Candy's now emeritus, but has a sharp ear for nuance, I think. And, yeah.
Lance, what I was going to say about that piece that you played for us, that was in the cistern, what I'm so struck by is how quickly I can go into a whole different space where it feels like almost like my head opens up completely, and I sort of like get the chills, and it just feels like all the walls are falling away and space just expands out without a boundary. And a piece that you just played can get me there so fast, I guess. And when you asked, are we in the same space as we were before the piece? Absolutely not. At least for me. So it's powerful what it can do, I guess.
And would you say, Andy, that that's like a point of reference? You know, when you're you're really uptight about something, and when the space feels very tight or angry, or that there's a feeling of compression, maybe, tension, stress, and then going outside maybe and finding, like Licity saying, it's a beautiful day. Wow, what am I so this or that about?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is I have this belief that if you were the Buddha, let's say, you don't need to have an aesthetic situation to get you to that space, because you could just get there. But for us mortals, we need something to get us there. And so it could be, as I say, like it could be something that's beautiful that draws your attention, or a landscape or something like that. But sound like that I don't know if any of you play the didgeridoo, but it could do the same thing. Like it just, all of a sudden it's just going out big, big, big. And then I guess, I'm not trying to be dumb. It's that the boundaries of who I think I am, or what's containing, spreads out. And the sound can do that. So yeah, I guess it's a point of reference that it's easy to change, right? Something you could be changed from your boundaries quickly. It seems to me with the right prompt or something like that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Lance, I wanted to comment when I was reading the notes to prepare for this, and the phrase deep listening was there. I thought, when I play these, I'm supposed to really listen. I'm not, for me, I put music on and, I'm doing something around the house, or, it's in the background. And I found it really difficult to sit. One, I didn't have a lot of time, but, it's really difficult to sit and listen. And this whole conversation about deep listening is really I guess, like I said, my 3 words, open my ears. It's opening me to how I use music in my life, as opposed to opening myself to the music.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty radical.
Yeah.
Even for music students are not taught to listen in this way. They function, our string players can attest to this, right? Your intonation, how you phrase something, how it's bowed, that it's almost automatic for people on the level of Joanna or Maureen or Laura as a flutist to judge, to drop that, or to be doing something else. So I see you have a nice, in back of you is a nice setting, and walls are white, but if you had interesting wallpaper, you would go about your day with the wallpaper, not noticing it very much, but so I think it's easy to use music as wallpaper, doing something else. And the actual practice of carving out time to say, I'm just going to listen and do nothing else is hard. But it takes some commitment.
It breaks my heart. There's so many things that you've said that are sparking things in me, but I forgot to mention earlier, I'm a musician myself, and it's so much fun going to the festival because it's the one place I go in the world where everybody turns around and says, "Are you a musician?" And I just feel like my identity is there. But I play folk music layered with rock and roll, so that always shocks them a little bit. But in my world, people are constantly saying to me, I don't listen to music anymore. And I just want to strangle them. What's wrong with you? What happened? When did we stop listening to music? But then listening to you, Lance, talk about it, it's wow, when did we stop listening to music?
Yes, exactly.
It's a whole different level. And I gave a streaming show last Friday, and I had this is probably the hardest time I've ever had to do a performance because so much stuff is going on. My head is completely clogged with anxiety and worry, and it's tremendous. So I put a sign underneath the camera that said, "Don't miss the song." And it was like just my saying, like, it's you, this song only exists for this continuum of time. Do not miss a note.
Yeah.
Be totally inside of it. And then I also, for me, there's that level. And then I can, if I get so inside the song, which is so emotional for me, I will literally forget where I am. I forget where I'm standing in the room, and I will, it's like, I have to kind of stay like within a certain boundary of like listening in a very specific way. And I also find, I think why people always say the festival is so challenging, which is not something I find it so nourishing, but for the first 2 months of this quarantine, before I had to prepare for my show, I couldn't listen to music really, and I couldn't sing. Like I'd have my iPod on shuffle, and one of my favorite musicians would come up and I'd skip it. And I'd say, it's too emotional. I can't handle it right now. And I think what you're asking, like most people just can't handle. Like it's such an intense connection, and we don't live that presently on a daily basis, and we have to be so open to what the music does to us.
But you don't have to do it all at once. That's the thing. So I mean, you don't have to blow your heart open. It's the practice aspect of it is playing where your edge is. It's like yoga, doing a forward bend. You don't have to look like, the yoga journal, hot shots on the cover. Wherever your edge is, that's where you work, and that's real yoga. That's real practice, is knowing where your edges are and being willing to hang out there so that they grow, right? It's also a metaphor for learning. Whether you use it for, I know this much, I know what I like and I don't like, that kind of bunker mentality that you want to stay within your comfort zone. So, but let's be honest about this, that we live in a culture of incredible seduction in which the use of music and the use of images are manufactured by people who want our money. They want our attention, right? And they want our money, and they're very, very good at it. I read the New Yorker online, and I've got 3 young women or 4 with bikinis on, moving around. I have to cover up part of the screen because the eyes move towards motion, and I don't want to. I want to be reading the article, not looking at these models, but so I guess I'm saying it takes some awareness that we're being manipulated, or all the things that we think maybe. That's one of the things maybe the pandemic could show us, is that a lot of the things we thought were necessities are not. That if we're healthy and have enough to eat, and connect with loved ones, boy, that's really precious. Family connection, music. I don't need all the bells and whistles, but thank you for that.
I had a different thought. I think I was a few years ago, I was in Target or something like that, and a Fleetwood Mac song came on, just while you're walking around in Target shopping, and I find their music so beautiful. It's so well done, and I thought, okay, here's this truly artful thing that's, as you said, wallpaper. It's just like this background thing that you're not even paying attention to, and now I don't like music as wallpaper in any way. I just don't even want to hear it. I want to be paying attention to it. So, but it's ubiquitous, right? Stores just have music playing all the time, and it's strange.
Let me ask: have any of you heard Schoenberg played in as Muzak?
I don't think so.
Or Stockhausen, or Getty?
It'd be too shocking, right?
Right.
Ice cream.
Mostly Vivaldi.
You're not conducive to making you purchase things.
Right.
Like people would be hurling out of the store with. But actually I mean, it's kind of a joke, but actually Schoenberg felt, and others felt like that they didn't want their music to be commodified.
Yeah.
They wanted it to be difficult. I mean, they wanted it to be challenging and not to be cheapened by commercialization.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, Tracy Chapman, Felicity, you must know Tracy Chapman.
Not personally.
But our music, the Fast Car, remember that? Some music?
Yes.
Right, kind of critique of, and then you hear that then in Target or Macy's or something.
Okay, so that's like kind of shocking. I mean, the fact that Tracy had any success at all is shocking. But but my argument for, I mean, music as wallpaper, I think, is tragic, except for the fact that music used to be a very communal experience.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my favorite moments of music is, I mean, Trader Joe's has the best soundtrack you can get anywhere. And you go through, and I'm always singing, rocking out, buying eggs or cheese or whatever. And when I have that moment, somebody passes me and we're singing the same song. Like that's beautiful, because it used to be a shared experience because we all used to listen to the radio. Now it's very individualized, and I don't know what people are doing with their time that they're not listening to music, because that's what we all used to do. That was our life. I used to put a record on, lie down on the floor and listen to it, So yeah, but
I think like that's been, such a difficult thing about the pandemic too, because maybe it's not so much a communal event all the time anyway, but now we don't have concerts that we all attend together during this time. And that's one of the reasons it's so nice to do something like this, because we're sort of in a way sitting all in the same room, and it's just a reminder of how meaningful it is to be able to do that. And Andy, I was just going to say, I felt the exact same thing as you with the conch shell piece. That's what it was.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It was, and that I was so glad you played that, because as soon as it started, I, like Andy said, was just totally transformed to a different place. And I actually imagined myself in like a very spacious cathedral. And my breathing changed right away in a way where I was just like, so the breaths were more fulfilling than they have been for a while. And since the title of this little talk is like listening during the pandemic, it just felt like such a relief to have that moment where suddenly I felt like I was in a spacious environment rather than being like closed in, which has been something difficult about living in the city during all this time. There's like, it's hard to get out of a feeling, and it's a pretty small space. So yeah, I'm gonna listen to that one again later.
Maureen, can I ask, have you done any performance, ensemble performance through Zoom?
Not so much. I mean, it's been like really kind of 1 week at a time and what people feel up to doing, and trying to switch a certain amount of work over that we can manage to online stuff. And so the performance stuff for me, ensemble wise, like isn't really happening yet. So I'm hoping that we won't be in this situation for too much longer, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
So a question?
Yeah, Tom.
So the things that you've been talking about with respect to listening resonate for me when I think about or when I listen to traditional music. Or when I just think about listening in a more general sense, on the state of mind that one gets into or doesn't get into, and relationship to nature and other people and so on. But that, for me, stops with new music, generally, for the most part. And so I might be the exception in this discussion, since most of the people who experience what I do with new music don't come to these discussions. I mean, they don't come to the music festival, and that's a fairly substantial portion of Ojai, who say, that's for special people, that's not for me. And I think they're all crazy. I mean, it sounds like garbage cans bumping into each other. To me, it's just noise, and why would I want to go to that? So I guess my question is it your view that the appreciation of new music is universal and that there are just some people who learn it faster than others? Or is it sort of esoteric?
Good question. I think that's, I don't think it's universal. I don't think that arguments are made, that we don't have enough space, but in the future, we'll love Stockhausen or Penderecki. I think what's interesting in my lifetime and what's happened is that in the 60s and 70s, there was a real ideological divide between largely academic composers who were writing music that was impenetrably difficult. My friend at the time, New York Times, Tony Tomasini, called it the complicated music gang. And they were writing music largely for one another. In fact, I heard one of them say at a music festival, another composer asked him what he listens to, and he said, what did he say? Oh, he said, no, I don't listen to this stuff. I listen to Mozart, and I thought it was very sad that that he was writing music that he didn't expect other people to listen to, or that. So I think that strain of avant-garde music in the 60s and 70s was an ideological niche, actually. And it was, I think, in retrospect, not very smart for people to write music that was that impenetrably difficult and expect everyone to like it. What happened in the 80s is sort of a melting away. I could feel it, actually, that you didn't have to take sides, that there was so much in new music, classical music that was being written, that the spectrum was so broad, that there is a lot to relate to and appreciate. You don't have to like or be exposed to or expose yourself to music that's highly dissonant. So at the Ojai Festival, I wanted to talk about that sometime, the way that I have to say that I felt tremendous sadness when I looked at the whole program for this year, the 74th annual program, which is many years, at least 3 years in the planning, and how meticulous, how much time and effort and expectations and money went into it. And of course it had to be canceled. And because each of those concerts is so well thought out. So like, we don't have time to listen to any of Anthony Rumenick's harpsichord and piano recital. That we could spend at least 2 hours just on that, unpacking that 400 years of music, from William Byrd to Ligeti, and the harpsichord and the piano, and the way that those pieces are connected through invention, through the fantasy form, is really, really interesting. And the way some things he slips. So in other words, you could sit back and I think and enjoy much of that concert because it was within the range of accessible. But at the same time, it was one of the things that makes classical music so rewarding is that it has some depth that it doesn't wear out. I think often top 40 songs, or at least the things that are ground out in Nashville and other places, are just meant to be ephemeral, to make the pop charts and then to fade away. But a lot of classical music is a gem that keeps giving.
Oh, that's just the stuff that survived. Do you know how much of that classical music was thrown in the garbage when they were making it?
Oh. Yes, thank goodness, because musicologists can have dissertation topics of unknown composers.
No one knows what will last. No one knows what will last.
Can I?
Nancy, yeah, go ahead.
So I think this is relevant. It may be jumping ahead a bit, but I love the piano and the harpsichord piece so much, and from start to finish. But the John Adams piece, Rising, or I think that's what
Everything Rises.
Yeah. Everything Rises. So I read the notes, and it said, so he starts with the lowest notes, and then he goes to the highest notes. And so I just felt like, okay, let's get to it. Okay, so I listened to the lowest notes. I listened to the highest notes. Or I listened to the middle notes. And basically, I don't get John Adams. I've been to the music festival several years where he has been the star, and I can't get it. I can't get John Adams. I can't listen to John Adams.
Yeah, well, that's that's fine.
So
I think
I love.
He would say fine, you know.
It's not about him. Yeah. It's about, I don't understand why it's a good use of my time to listen to dissonant, long-lived, right? Okay, like it takes a long time to get there, an hour.
Yes, 59 minutes.
Why would I want to? Okay, that's it.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone went to the Catherine Lamb, the Jack Quartet was there last year and played a piece by Catherine Lamb that was similar, in the dark actually. It lasted about an hour, almost an hour. And it was excruciatingly slow. So I actually I didn't think I would get to play that, but I wanted to talk about both ritual and placeness in music. And just to mention, you know, Debussy arguably is one of the most influential classical composers that ever lived in terms of how he influenced so many composers in the 20th century. And that's because Debussy discovered, or it's hard to say, maybe this is an oversimplification, but in 1889, when he was only still in his 20s, I think, he heard Javanese gamelan. There was a World Exposition, like a World's Fair in Paris in 1889, and they had an ensemble from Java, which is a percussion, some of you may know, a gamelan is a percussion ensemble that basically doesn't go anywhere. It's very sophisticated, but everyone involved is playing cycles. So when Debussy heard that, he went, whatever the French would be, holy shit. Man, this is amazing. This is amazing, what they're doing. This is so much more sophisticated than what we're doing, you know. And what he discovered then was a new sense of musical time. And the fancy word for that is non-teleological. So telos means goal, and teleological music is most of the music that we listen to. Has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the trajectory is toward the end, right? And most classical music begins on a home key, takes an adventure, and then comes back to the home key. So it's very emotionally, psychologically satisfying, the way that music has been constructed. But what's the hurry? You know, there's a wonderful, I wanted to tell this story of the poet Gary Snyder, an environmentalist. It's silly, you know, that in I guess in the Redwood Forest, there's some rocks on the ground, and one rock looks up at one of the redwood trees and says, "What's your hurry?"
Lance, I could ask you a question though. Here's what I thought Tom was kind of suggesting a while ago, and that is that let's say you have a book like Finnegan's Wake or something like that, or you see there's this painting that's so opaque and it's very hard to kind of decode whatever's happening. So I guess what I thought Tom was suggesting was that there's this artful piece and it's asking you to meet it somewhere, but if it's too challenging, this is what I thought Nancy was kind of suggesting. If it's too much, I don't want to meet it. right? It's too much work. Like it's not worth me meeting it. So it's got to be somewhere, it's got to attract me enough to say, oh yes, I'm ready to invest the time into the work. So I would say like Finnegan's Wake, I'll use that as an example. Like it's just too opaque, and I don't want to have to read a book that I need the whole, annotated thing that's twice as long. It's just not worth it. But so I would say these, like Debussy is a great example to me, that it like pulls me in and makes me really want to pay attention to it, where some of the dissonance that you hear at the music festival, it's just, there was a piece about, not last year, but the year before, maybe it was about cancer or something, like where the person was dying and like going through the cancer treatment. And it was so painful. Like, I wish I wouldn't have gone, but I didn't feel like I could leave. So I was there for like an hour going, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like, I hate it. But it was just very challenging. So anyway, something about, I thought what Nancy was pointing us to was, there's got to be something that pulls you enough that you want to, it doesn't have to sit in your lap, but it's got to attract you enough, it seems to me. That's just my view. I don't know.
Yeah, well, my response was the fact that this is, first place, I think that that Joyce didn't expect a bestseller.
Right.
That he was writing for a certain level of intellectuals who might want to invest the time to just to discover the treasures and interesting of that. And what I mentioned, to Nancy was that, okay, it's an hour in which the development is painfully slow if you're expecting the kind of harmonic development of movement, harmonic rhythm in the classical piece. But if you can say, it may be too much to say, I'm going to meditate for an hour and I'm going to use Everything Rises as my point of reference. So there may be a point, but and this is your choice. I mean, you don't have to go there at all. I mean, walk out, get away. Just don't go there. But as a challenge to say, well, let me see if I can hear what's going on.
Yeah.
And find interesting. So the piece that Jack did last year, which was a spectral piece, which is playing notes. I mean, and then going slightly out of tune and everything. I have to say, I did feel incredibly cleansed after that, because I guess I couldn't get out. I wouldn't have left, but that I was present for this very, very slow process. So that's the rationale, Nancy, but it's nothing that you have to subject yourself to. Minimal music, Steve Reich or Philip Glass are doing similar things slowly in a way that's maybe more accessible.
I wanted to comment when Tom was speaking. Part of what I was hearing and what he said was, or maybe he was asking, a subtext is, are these composers doing this for themselves, for each other, as opposed for an audience? Is it just this inbred thing? And then I'm also thinking of Leachy's comment about the festival elevating the IQ of Ojai. And I find myself somewhere in between. I have found, after years of going to the festival and walking out of performances and being mad that I had spent this money on these tickets, I started going to the Ojai talks the first day. And I found that opened me up to listening a little better. I'm not in the practice of deep listening, but it's like, I think the three of us, Tom and Leachy and I, represent maybe three places on the spectrum. It's like, boy, I'm really having trouble with this entirely. And I don't mean to speak for you, Tom, but that's kind of what I was hearing. And then Leachy's like, wow, this is the best thing ever. And I'm like, let me see if I can understand this, and let me at least make an effort. And I heard you speak last year too, Lance, when Andy had you in, and that has helped me. It still doesn't mean, well, and what I've also done is I started volunteering at the festival so that I'm not paying my own money to see a performance I don't like.
Resentment doesn't help.
I think
Can
that's
I
one of
just
the.
chime in?
Yeah, Licity, I think, was next.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's
Maureen.
Licity, by the way. I'm not quite a Chinese fruit yet, but I think what I'm hearing, which I find so fascinating, is that we're putting the burden of accessibility, of likability on the composer. And I think it's a really good practice in any relationship to ask yourself, like, maybe it's me, you know, like maybe I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe I hate this piece today because I am not there versus the piece is not reaching me. You know, there are musicians and bands that I couldn't listen to that I was like, that stuff gives me a headache. And then all of a sudden I went, oh, I know why it gives me a headache, because it's genius. But that took me 4 years to figure that out, right? So I feel like this idea that like the composer, we don't want the composer dumbing it down so everybody gets it. We want the composers going like, I'm gonna F with your head a little bit so you will try to meet me, or it will bother you so much. I always say, like me or hate me, you're gonna remember me, right? So the things that you hate, they still get you. Like they're still got under your skin. And I think that's really exciting, that it offers us a chance to lift ourselves. Lance, last year, you do you have this year, you showed us that diagram of the
3 circles.
concentric circles, and
Right.
like how most people are not living in a zone where we're like wanting to learn all the time. It's hard. But for those 4 days, I think that's what you're there to do. You know?
And the question, I think, is where your edge is, and that you're not compelled to listen and to things that are beyond your, you know, that are too uncomfortable, or you know that. But where your edge is. Maureen, were you going to say something?
Nancy, I was just, I actually heard Jack play this piece, Everything Rises, live one time in Banff, Canada. And they played it on top of a mountain as the sun was going down. And it was truly just an unforgettable experience. And that's the kind of thing that they do. And I really think like this is the way that music is kind of meant to be experienced, because John Luther Adams is just all about expansion, basically. It's just such a key ingredient in his quality and what he's exploring. There is an interview that I heard one time that I really enjoyed. I don't know if anyone listens to the podcast called On Being, but they did interview him one time, and it's an episode that I think is worth checking out. When you listen to his music, like sitting in a chair in a hall, I do think there's an element of that makes it harder to feel that, like, rather than listening, as Lance was saying, going along in a certain direction, you're sitting in one place and basically just radiating outward, like the motion is this way rather than linear. And that it's not, as he said, the way we're used to listening to things or having a general perception of time, and that it's worth exploring, but it's hard, you know, it is challenging. And you know, his pieces are long. So yeah, I agree. Like it can be difficult.
He said,
sure.
Let me just, I think that Laura had a place, but John Luther Adams said, my music is going inexorably from being about place to becoming place. Laura, you were going
I wanted to say, I'm thinking of a lot of this from the point of view of a performer. And I think that might speak to a little bit of Tom's concern or ideas. And when you're a performer, you're listening to subtleties amongst your colleagues. And when you played the conch piece at the beginning, I was noticing there were bird sounds, and I didn't know if that was somebody's Zoom microphone or if that was a part of the piece. But because you had set it up in the way, and that's part of what Licity did with the sign on the camera, you make an invitation. I think as a performer, it's important to make this sort of explicit invitation to listen to the subtleties. So in classical music, we're always listening to the attacks, the strength of the attacks, where the attacks are, to the pitch and where we need to be. And in modern music, there's just more of that. And so when I was involved in the John Luther Adams piece, Unuksuit, which is in the park with 49 percussionists, and I was one of the piccolo players up in the tree. Climbed the trees to play the piccolo. And John Adams is going to be the music director next year, which is a different John Adams than John Luther Adams, which did the Rising. So just as a warning. But the directions for that piece, which was 75 minutes long, was there was a loose form with timings, but the focus was more of a presence of listening and responding. And so as the piccolo player, listen to the birds. Are the birds responding to you? Do I respond back to the birds? Mm-hmm. And so you listen, you incorporate the environmental sounds, and that becomes a part of the piece because it informs how you're going to respond in performance. And I think or myself also, because when I listened to the Rising, I thought, okay, this is tension producing for me. It's just tension producing. And I had the same response, Nancy, but I think it requires more listening to subtlety, which as a society we largely lost when music became compressed and recorded. That when we're not listening to live music, there's so much more dynamic capability and listening to attacks in live music that you can't get in recorded music. And so our ability to listen to those subtle sounds, we just don't do that a lot in our life. Mm-hmm. So, and that's all I have to say.
Well, let me follow up with it, because I just to come back to Pauline. You didn't hear this in the part, but she said they went into the cistern and they didn't have any, we simply improvised, played, and learned that the cistern was playing with us. Mm-hmm. And then she said, that from that time, from learning from the cistern, is that whatever your environment you're in, you're performing, or even listening now, there's children playing outside of where I am. There's a lot of small children here, and it becomes part of our listening has been expanded to include that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think for me, that's part of the gift of the Ojai Festival, is that there is a smorgasbord, and you can read ahead and know, oh, I might not be quite so interested in that particular performance. But I don't expect to like every painting I see when I go to a museum either.
Right.
It has just invited us to maybe suspend our I don't like that reaction and just go, okay, what is this? And can I maybe just be present and focus and with intention see what I can get from this or how I respond, and then let it be that I don't have to love every piece. And when the Mozart comes back around, I can just relax.
Right.
That is such a beautiful sentiment.
And it's taken me years, because when I first heard about, they're winding up a whole bunch of metronomes and that's the piece. And then I thought, that's kind of cool, actually. And then the birds and trees were just, that whole piece blew me away at how it just built and how everyone responded to everyone else. And it was a thing of beauty. So I think it's a process that you come to of learning to appreciate what formerly you thought might have been just noise, and now it's really music and art.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, Jamie Bennett, who's the president of the Ojai Festival, said to me after the seminar, he said, a lot of this music I don't understand. He said, but coming to the festival for these years has made me just, I don't know, he said, I can be in that space. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the space. Yeah, go ahead, Arthur.
I just have a question. Talking about space, for me, it's kind of like wine tasting. I like wine tasting going from vineyard to vineyard. It makes the wine taste so much better. Mm-hmm. And so I have a question regarding the visual aspect of listening, which has been kind of touched on. But I noticed with these 4 pieces, and I listened to all of them, and some of them I could listen to much better with my eyes open, watching the performer. With the John Luther Adams piece, and the way they had it on the stage, really kind of dark with the, various points and everything. So I was in my recliner, which is what I'm in right now, and I shut my eyes, and I really enjoyed it. It was very soothing and incantatory, you know, almost like, yeah, an incantation. I don't know if that's a word, incantatory.
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you. And so there's the visual aspect that goes along, like during this lockdown, the Berliner Philharmoniker was offering 30 days free. So I ended up subscribing, and now I watch something, you know, just about every day, you know, on that. So it's kind of changed my, you know, my music, but I love looking at it. I love watching them play as I listen to the music. And yet this John Luther Adams piece, I don't think I could have watched it. I had to shut my eyes to enhance the listening experience. And then the last thing I'll say is, in one time in my entire life, I had what was almost like a mystical listening experience. And I was with a friend, and we were driving from where I lived in Santa Monica up to Brentwood on San Vicente Avenue. And we had spent the afternoon together, and it was the evening we were going up there to eat. And on KUSC, they were playing Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D major, is it? D major? Or
D major, yes.
D major. And you know, when it gets in that real intricate, you know, when the solo aspect of it, and for some, it was the weirdest, I can't even explain it. You know, that's why I was kind of interested in this deep listening thing, because it was unlike any listening experience I ever had. And I hadn't taken any drugs. And she had the same experience, because when it was all over, she said, that was really weird. And I said, yeah, that was really weird. I've never been able to recreate that experience. I wish I could.
Well, the wisdom on that is don't try. That trying actually is an obstacle for mystical experiences. It's about, actually it's about letting go. I had, parenthetically, I had the same experience driving and during the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto with a Heifetz recording coming over my little speakers in my car. I had to pull over. I couldn't drive. I mean, I was so lost in this performance.
That's a good way to describe it. Lost in the performance. I was part of the music. That's
and I think that Licity was getting at that too, when she said, you know, sometimes when she plays, she just, well, I forget your words, Licity, but you become the music, right? And which is a little iffy, because you're a performer and you're supposed to be not just dissolve completely into the music, but that famous Yeats poem, "Oh great rooted blossomer, oh brightening glance, how can we know the dancer from the dance?" You know, that at some point the dancer, the musician, the painter, the calligrapher becomes what they're doing.
There's also, when music sounds, all that I was, I am, ere to this haunted brooding dust I came.
Oh. Where's that from?
I think that's Lemaire.
I should know, yeah.
For me, listening outdoors, when nature is part of it, that just enhances the whole thing so much more than sitting in any kind of chair indoors. It just adds a whole layer that can't be replicated.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Laura for commenting, because your comments about being a performer really made me reflect on how much, you know, I don't know if it's everybody or just in the States, but we're used to being entertained. We just sit there and passively absorb, you know, or watch. You know, we're not accustomed to participating. And that's what we're talking about with this deep listening, is being a part of it. It's just, this, I really am enjoying this afternoon. Very illuminating.
Yeah, but it's nice to have performers in here too, speaking from their experience of how, of what happens when there's a moment. I remember our violin professor, Dan Mason, playing at the Shambhala Center, actually, piece by Bach, the third partita, very fast piece, and playing along. And then at one moment, he just dropped into the piece. It was like, he was playing very competently, all the notes, but then all of a sudden, in the middle of the piece, it was like, oh. And that's the moment, I think, as I understand, when the term ole, in a bullfight or a flamenco dance, ole is the moment when Allah or spirit enters the performance. So that is palpable, right? That you know that, and that creates a wonderful, almost magical, positive feedback loop. That the performer is not worried about her intonation or if there's a music critic in the audience or what people are thinking, but just offering this. And the audience is so grateful to receive it that they're sending back their gratitude, appreciation. So it becomes like this positive feedback, but it's hard to get there because, if you're a soloist, for example, or, in a chamber, you're up on stage exposed in front of hundreds of people, being judged or, and to be able to relax and just say, well, there's a wonderful book called The Perfect Wrong Note about performance anxiety. It's saying better to play a wrong note beautifully than to play all the right notes uptight, or out of fear.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you'd like to listen or experience what Aphrodite is so cute in that introduction, where she's introducing Lonely Child, this amazing piece. And I selected that of the wonderful Tune In Tuesday excerpts from previous festivals because she talks about music and ritual in a way, that the music was almost like a ritual. Let me see if I can just pull that up. Yeah, here she is. Can you see it on the screen, or do I have to? I guess I have to go to screen sharing.
Yeah.
Because she's where is she? Here she is. So this was at last year's festival, and her comments, of course, are now. We're recently introducing the excerpt.
So, performing Lonely Child made me feel vulnerable and strong at the same time. This piece changes you. It is a ritual, and it's really a journey. The very moment we finished the piece, and you can see it on the video, the silence after Lonely Child, after the last bar, it's only crickets. No one coughed in the audience. It's the most amazing audience I have performed for. The silence right after the last bar, it was being together. It was being in the ritual. And in times like this, I really believe that maybe we are making music in order to be able to experience silence more intense. I just want to thank Elaine for being an angel. Thank you, Tom, for the trust. And last but not least, thank you, Maggie, for the tacos in LA. We're amazing. Stay home, stay healthy, support your artists. Art, it makes society more human. Enjoy Lonely Child.
Yeah, she is adorable. And I should say that Barbara Hennigan was the artistic director. I don't know if all of you, I think all of you couldn't have seen this. Maybe I can just play a little excerpt for it to experience some of that. Because Barbara is astonishing as a fabulous singer, operatic singer, and then tried her hand at conducting, and turns out she's a fabulous conductor as well. And but beyond that, she's has a dedication to supporting young artists. So she selected artists for this group called Ludwig, the orchestra. And there's a lot of nice videos, but when she discovered Aphrodite, she couldn't resist inviting her and to highlight her in this and other pieces. And let me just see, 214. Yeah, it's quite a wonderful introduction. This is, if you haven't read the program notes, this is by Claude Vivier, a composer from Montreal, who died tragically at age 34, actually just before his 35th birthday, with a very difficult childhood, growing up in an orphanage, not knowing who his parents were, and being gay and having dealing with a lot of issues of his origin and so forth. And this is a piece that he described as autobiographical. And here is the point where where Aphrodite, the singer, comes in. The text is in French and also in a made-up language of syllables that were, I don't know if they were derived from something, but they're not in language that we can understand, at least the words. Sorry, it's really almost sacrilegious to do this, but you can listen to this since it's recorded. This is I'm leaving out some of the made-up language, but this to advance it a little bit in the interest of time. I've got the goosies, as they say in Melbourne. It gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Any comments?
Yeah, I would say I love watching Barbara Hannigan conduct. She moves through space and brings the music to life in a way that's so personal and intimate, but also is purely about the music. There's clearly like no ego, and it's just so it's astonishing. The bass drum, I was really glad that you put the marker there, because that is watching her make like a decision to hold everything in a place of suspension by choosing not to use her arms to cue the bass drum, you know, in that time is I don't know. It's just it's so effective. It's just really, it's such a privilege to see someone bring something to life like that. I hope you guys got to see it live if you're all here today.
It's interesting what a different experience it is. I mean, of course, it was magical, as Aphrodite described it, you know, as a sense of ritual and appreciating silence. But the fabulous videography there of being able to, in the audience, obviously you can't see her face, you can't, and the cello glissandi, and you know, it's a different experience, but one also of intimacy.
I think watching Barbara reminds me that there's a story to every piece. Sometimes you get lost in just, I like that, or I don't like that, or the sounds, but she, especially watching her face, reminds you that there's a story here, and that's what's being conveyed.
Indeed. You know, one of the, it's interesting to use words to describe music, because it can't be described in words, and yet we are storytellers, and language, we communicate through language. So that the challenge in writing or talking about music is to maybe use the right metaphors that lead people back to the music. So talking about listening, I would like to show you, let's see if I can, something that is, unless it's disappeared, which it may have. Andy, do you have that?
Which piece?
My mime piece.
Oh yeah, I have it right here.
This was supposed to be a joke up front, but
yeah. Hold on one second. Can you guys see that?
Uh-huh.
The first rule of miming is you don't talk about miming.
Right.
So I would say the first rule of listening is you don't talk about listening, or you don't talk about silence, except that wonderful quote by Debussy that I have at the bottom, where he says, you know, it's not, purpose of music is not to think about music, but to listen. I don't know, I'd like to, we're getting close to the end. I do have a finale, but a number of you haven't had a chance to comment, but seem to be very listening in a very engaged way.
I have a request. If it's possible to get the link for Pauline's TEDx talk.
Absolutely.
I don't know where I would find that.
I'll send it. I can put it up on the chat.
Yeah.
It would just be Pauline Oliveira's TEDx Indianapolis, but it's maybe Andy, you could.
That's what I was going to suggest. What I could do is take the list that you gave me. I'll just email it to everybody, so everybody will have all the links to everything.
Oh, good.
Yeah. No problem. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I'd like to play to end with just the last bit of the final concert of last year with Barbara Hennigan. It's a suite, kind of a medley of Gershwin songs from Girl Crazy, the 1930 musical by George and Ira Gershwin, and it's I want to play it because, well, it's because it's fabulous.
Hey everybody, stop clicking around. I am in the woods.
Where that's coming from, but it gives you a sense, for those of you who weren't at the festival, of how remarkable the festival was in its culmination. And this is a piece, well, it's Gershwin tunes, but Bill Elliott, the composer arranger, had a kind of, it was an interesting mashup of harmonies that Alban Berg or Arnold Schoenberg, modern, challenging harmonies, sophisticated harmonies and orchestration, in with this Gershwin. And you may or may not know that Arnold Schoenberg was George Gershwin's tennis partner. They were very close friends. In fact, Gershwin died tragically at age 39, and Schoenberg gave the eulogy at his funeral. So was a kind of crossover between popular Showtime music and classical music, and this arrangement really really nails it. Let me see if I can find this. I'll find it, and then here it is. Oh, are you on my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the end of this Gershwin suite that put together, and it's the end of the festival, just the very end. You'll recognize the tune.
I got my man who could ask for anything more. I got daisies in every pasture. I got my man who could ask for anything more. Oh, man's cool, I don't mind. You won't find me around my door. I got starlight, I got sweet dreams. I got one man who could ask for anything more. Who could ask for anything more?
Wow.
Well, I wanted to end with that, but because it's just so spectacular, and it kind of a perfect ending to a festival, a 4-day intensive festival. You can feel the appreciation of the audience, of the musicians, you know, and how magical that is. And I want to close with a little reference to John O'Donohue. Some of you may recognize, who was the Irish theologian and priest, an author, who died tragically in 2008 at the age of 53 of a heart attack. But he was on Being, Christopher Tippett's program, and he talked, I think the name of the program is The Inner Landscape of Beauty. So talking about metaphors for music and space and so forth, that Krista, I think, asked him a question about how he kept his energy and resilience up in difficult situations, like ours maybe. And he said, well, you know, I was brought up on the west coast of Ireland. It was a beautiful landscape that opens up into the sea. And he said, I've always kept that landscape in my heart. It was just to say, one should have an inner landscape of beauty to draw on. And I'd like to propose that we could do that with music. That music can help shape our inner life and our inner landscape. You know, in ways, particularly challenging times like this, where we get news 24/7, you know, and are checking our news feeds, and the news is so depressing and difficult and dire, which we don't want to ignore, obviously, but we need to have resources of resilience. And so I'd like to leave you with that part of deep listening and cherishing these pieces, listening when you're not doing anything else, but just connecting to the sound, not making sense of it, but letting it work on you and cultivate that inner landscape. And I think the festival does that in a really amazing way. There are many other things that do that, but we can seek that out and appreciate that, I think. So it's really wonderful to have an opportunity to be with you this afternoon. And thank you so much, Andy and Laura, and in absentia, Gina and Jamie, and the whole staff of the Ojai Festival. That, as you may know, that the festival will be online this year from the 11th to the 14th, with interviews with some of the composers and artists, particularly Matthias Pincher and Olga, Olga, I forget her last name, Rotheim or something, yeah, composer, the Calder Quartet, and then Steve Reich on the 14th. And also there'll be a Zoom lounge, is it, Laura?
Yes.
At 6 o'clock for those who want to come. Does everyone get that link, or maybe Andy could send it if you wanted to tune in early?
Yeah, no, I'll send it to everybody as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
As a representative of the festival, I want to really thank Andy for putting this all together.
Oh yeah.
And Lance for your guidance and listening and teaching and thoughtfulness. Just deep thoughtfulness about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So Rick, and to reconnect with Joanna and Maureen again, and Pierre and my friends from and Licity from last time, and for Candy to join us from Los Angeles, from Brentwood. Yeah. Thank you all so much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Joanna, twice a year.
Very good.
What a treat.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Laura.